Our next storyteller is fabulous. When the last time we checked in with her, she was working towards being in the marine industry. So I want everyone to get a huge, big, warm, electric welcome to Sarah Scott. Yay!
Yay, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I was on here a few years ago talking about some sailing dreams I had. And those dreams have shifted a little bit, but I'll kind of give a summary from the beginning. I did not grow up with any sailing ambitions. I had never been sailing as a kid. And I had completely different goals. I went to school for creative writing and I graduated and I was trying to make a living off of that and working in restaurants. And then when I was 31, I watched a documentary on Netflix called Maiden Trip that I found really inspiring. It was about Laura Decker, who became the youngest person to sail around the world alone. And something about that just really drew me into sailing. And I watched it a few times, but then I put it on the back burner. But I got a personal injury settlement about half a year later, and then it came back to me that I should buy a boat with it. And I started, single handing around the Puget Sound and also reading a lot of solo sailing memoirs. And I read dozens of them, especially people who were single handing around the world. I started to notice that there had never been a Black woman who had done it before. And I'm half Black. So I thought that this was something that I might be able to aspire to. So I learned everything I can and I got a job at Fisheries Supply, which is a marine hardware store in Seattle, where I'm located. And I also spent about 6 months preparing to sail my then boat around Vancouver Island alone. I spent 8 months recoring the deck from underneath, which was totally rotten. And then I also spent 6 months basically rebuilding every system of the boat from scratch and learning as I went with the electrical. And I rebuilt all the engine accessories and had the engine. I put the engine in the boat and I aligned it with help from people. So I met some really great people along the way. I met my friend Meredith, who's in the picture right there, who's a diesel mechanic, and she helped me out a lot. And I was really determined to do this. I thought it was the path I was meant to be on. And I did get about halfway up the eastern side of Vancouver Island. That there is my boat in Pender Harbor. But I got about halfway up and I was having a lot of engine troubles and I was anchored in a remote spot on a lee shore with the wind blowing 25 knots towards the rocks and my engine died. And I could not sail off the lee shore because my boat was really heavy and it didn't point well. So I could have ended up on the rocks really fast because the boat could have gotten spun around the second the anchor came off the ground. So I decided to call the Coast Guard. I got towed. I ended up having my ex-girlfriend at the time pick up an outboard motor on her way up to visit me in her car, and we with the help of some locals tacked it onto the back of the boat, so I was able to come back home to Seattle. And I aspired to try again in another year or the next summer, but those my priorities started to shift a little bit. I felt that sailing was actually much more straightforward. I know that solo sailing, or the goal of sailing around the world, seems pretty hard, but it was actually a lot more straightforward to me than figuring out relationships as an only child. Sailing had steps. They were really hard steps and it was really complicated, but at least they were clear. You fix this, you learn that, you make a plan. You always tether yourself in every time you step into the cockpit, and you won't die, you won't get separated from the boat. Just have to remember that. So there was a checklist and a manual. But relationships for me did not have a manual. There was no checklist. It just seemed like trial and error and frustration. And I didn't know why things weren't working the way I wanted them to. And I felt completely lost in that arena. So I did what made sense to me. I threw myself into something I could figure out. And then at some point, I had to ask myself if I were truly alone in the middle of the ocean with no one to save me, and I did fall off my boat, would I have any regrets? And the truth was, yes. I started to realize that I wasn't someone who could say, this is the only thing I want out of life. I still loved the idea of solo sailing, but I didn't want to use it as an escape from figuring out what I really wanted, a life that included love, stability, and self-sufficiency. I had to rethink how to achieve independence, and that's when my focus started to shift. I had been working at Fisheries Supply, the marine hardware store, I think I mentioned, for about 7 years. And I had 3 jobs. I worked at a domestic violence hotline, and I also spliced rope for fisheries on the side. So I was working about 60 to 80 hours a week and making like $80,000 a year with all of these combined. So I still felt pretty stuck. I was paying for therapy, trying to keep a boat, and trying to I wanted to have a boat and apartment, but couldn't quite do that. And there was just like there was no room to breathe financially. And then at Fisheries Supply, I got assigned to lead a Victron Energy project, setting up a full marine energy system in the store. And I read all the product manuals and I learned everything I could. And then something just clicked. I already had some knowledge from building electrical systems on my previous boats. And I realized that I had spent 7 years helping other people who own marine businesses, but why couldn't I be one of those people? So over the next year, I got ABYC certified as a marine electrical technician. And I started an electrical business called Sarah's Shipshape Services. And then here I am 3 years after starting the business. I've sent out almost 300 invoices and I'm running my own company. And I've also hired an apprentice, Erin, who I actually met through my YouTube channel called it was called Adventures of a Black Woman Sailor at the time, and now it's my business channel. But now, so we met. She was a Black woman in sailing, and that's how she found me. So she kind of filmed my videos in exchange for sailing knowledge, and now she's learning electrical. She's my electrical apprentice, and she's been doing that with me for about a year. And she also hopes to get certified. And so yeah, they say the cobbler's children go barefoot. And well, a marine electrician's boat sits neglected. Running my business meant less time for my own boat. And at one point, I even, until recently, convinced myself that I should sell it. I thought a condo would be the smarter investment because boats depreciate and condos appreciate. But then I realized sailing isn't just a past dream. It's something I still love, and I don't want to let it go. So I decided to keep my boat, even if it takes time to fix it up and get back out on the water. I know that I want to make it happen. And because of my business, I can have both. I don't have to choose between financial stability and my passion. I can build a life where I get to have both. Even though it'll take me a little bit longer to get a condo, I think I can still have it in a while. I'd say the key takeaway, things I've learned, dreams change, and that's not a failure, it's growth. What I thought I wanted, solo sailing, turned out to be a stepping stone to something even bigger, real independence. And if there is one thing I've learned, it's this. If something feels impossible, maybe it's just because I haven't figured out the right path yet. And maybe the path doesn't exist yet. Maybe I have to build it myself. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So thank you. And thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm going to post my the link to my business, my website on the chat. We do remote consultations for anyone who isn't in Seattle as well. So thank you.